Popes, pirates, aliens, and a whole lot of treasure. Forgotten books, magic spells, and corrupted Bibles. Today is all about cursed relics and scary things the Vatican doesn't want you to know about. Ancient Egyptian magic. Banned. The Vatican is filled with treasures from ancient Egypt. They have artifacts that date back to a time when magic played a major role in human society. Let's dig into the magic right away, then I'll show you some of the crazy artifacts the Vatican is keeping to themselves. In Egypt, magic was called Heka. It was a daily part of both life and the afterlife. For the Egyptians, everything in their world was controlled by unseen forces. Either the gods had a hand in it or the souls of the dead did. So to gain some control over their chaotic lives, Egyptians turned to magic. Egyptians would go to temples and participate in rituals. Even in the poorest parts of the ancient kingdom, peasants dedicated much of their lives to magic. The villagers used to spend a massive portion of their income on magical amulets and spells. They would buy these things even though they barely had any money, purchasing them from people who were essentially traveling merchant wizards. Picture Gandalf on his cart of fireworks, only in the Egyptian desert. And instead of fireworks, there were bizarre amulets and figurines that supposedly had magic power. In 1506, the Vatican Museum was founded. It's currently one of the richest museums on the planet, with more than 70,000 artifacts stored inside its rooms. Only 20,000 of them are on display. Many are stuck in old, dusty storage boxes and will likely never see the light of day. One section of the museum is dedicated to Egypt. 9 rooms are set aside in the Belvedere Palace, which was converted from the old apartments of Pope Pius IV in the 16th century. And one of the most impressive objects you'll see here is the coffin of Jedmut, dating back to between 949 and 909 BC. Jedmut was a chantress of Amun in the 22nd dynasty. The coffin is incredibly well preserved, even after so many centuries. You can still see the spells that were drawn all over the coffin's exterior, words of magic meant to keep the chantress safe as she journeyed into the afterlife. I should tell you what a chantress was, seeing as it isn't even a real word. It was popular for aristocratic women in ancient Thebes to sing, chant, and make music at the Karnak temple. It was all part of the aura of magic that surrounded these mystical places along the ancient Nile River. The Vatican holds countless Egyptian artifacts, too many to name individually. Among them are the cursed statues of the Eye of Horus, and some might even retain a fragment of their ancient power. Without a comprehensive list, the Vatican could possess all kinds of fascinating and mysterious Egyptian relics that even today are unknown to the public. The Pope's secret pirate treasure. Have you ever heard of a pirate named Firefart before? Probably not. Barely anybody has. He doesn't exactly have the kind of clout that Blackbeard still has all these years after his death. But after what I'm about to tell you, you'll never forget the name Firefart again. His story comes directly from the Vatican archives, a place filled with so much knowledge that no one person could remember it all. The documents outlining this fable are so epic they've been turned into a newly published book. The book is called The Spoils of the Pope and the Pirates, 1357, the complete legal dossier from the Vatican archives. I think it might just be the longest book title in history. Early in 1357 AD, a ship named the São Vicente was filled to its brim with the treasures of a dead bishop. It set sail from Lisbon, called Lisboa in the Middle Ages. The Vatican documents say the ship's cargo holds were filled with tapestries, gold, and jewels. All the treasure had belonged to Thibaut de Castillon, the Bishop of Lisboa. He had accumulated this fantastic wealth during his years of service in the church. I say service, but the editors of the new book, Daniel Williman from Binghamton University and Karen Ann Corsano, said it a little differently. The bishop exploited the people by managing commercial operations and important merchants. He was the bishop, but he also participated in commercial activities, things like speculative trading and stockpiling commodities like wool to manipulate the price. This bishop was playing the stock market before the stock market existed. The Vatican knew what was going on, but looked the other way. It wasn't unusual for one of their bishops to become filthy rich. But then, as all men do, Thibaut died. After his death, his treasure was loaded onto the Sovicente and was sent to Avignon in France, where Pope Innocent VI was happy to take on the burden of all those riches. But the ship didn't make it. They were attacked by a pair of pirate vessels. One of the vessels was captained by none other than Antonio Botafoc. And Botafoc is a word that literally translates to fire fart. Don't ask me what he did to earn the nickname. I have no idea. The pirates didn't get very far. Antonio Firefart's crew was captured and hanged on the beach by the rigging of their own ship's sails. Firefart himself was spared and sent to prison. The stolen treasure went to the Pope, while Vatican records indicate that Antonio Botafoc escaped the hangman's noose. He might have survived by paying a bribe to church officials to be freed. And there you have it. Somewhere in the Vatican is treasure acquired through dubious means by a corrupt bishop, stolen by a pirate with a really weird name, and then given to the Pope. And that's only a piece of the Vatican's crazy treasure. Keep listening for more. And now for number 9, but first it's shout-out time. I wanted to give a big thank you to KP Booker and Lack of Ermal Verpel for supporting this channel. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already for more videos like these. The Orphan Story. The Orphan Story is a cursed novel that was lost for 400 years and was only published recently. It's full of adventure and imperial violence. The book, called Historia del Huérfano in Spanish, describes the life of a young Spaniard who fled Granada and went to America to seek a fortune. The young protagonist bounced around the Spanish Empire like a ball in a pinball machine. He witnessed Sir Francis Drake's attack on Puerto Rico, and he saw the sacking of Cadiz. He got into a shipwreck, fought some pirates, and eventually he settled down as a monk in Peru. The book was written between 1608 and 1615 by an Augustinian friar named Martín de León y Cárdenas. It was supposed to be mass-published in 1621, but it never reached the presses. Why? Well, likely because the author was afraid of the church. Martin would go on to become an archbishop and the president of the Viceroyalty of Sicily. He didn't want his adventurous novel to be a stain on what ended up being a successful career in the church. So his book was buried and lost until 1965. A Spanish scholar stumbled upon the manuscript in the archives of the Hispanic Society of America. The scholar tried to publish the book, but it took a long time to happen. People said that its 328 pages contained a curse. Those who tried to publish the book all ended up dead. The crazy part is that it's true. The reason it's taken so many years to publish the Orphan Story, 4 whole centuries, is that the people who have worked on it have died. They've either caught a strange disease or perished randomly. And since the 1960s, several of the people who tried to publish the book died in car accidents. Isn't that spooky? The curse appears to be lifted though, because now the book is published. If you're interested in a unique glimpse into the Spanish conquest, it's something you might want to check out. The book has everything from the mercury mines of Juan Cavalica worked by indigenous slaves to the poet parties of 17th century Lima. The stolen Temple Menorah. One of the most important Jewish artifacts ever has been missing since an attack by the Romans on Jerusalem almost 2,000 years ago. Some say the Vatican is keeping it in their secret archives, refusing to even admit the relic is real. If you don't know what a menorah is, you most likely haven't been to many Hanukkah parties. A menorah is essentially a candle holder, a candelabrum with 8 branches. 1 branch is for each day of the Hanukkah celebration. It's been a symbol of the Jewish people and Judaism since antiquity. According to the Bible, the original menorah, known as the Temple Menorah, was made by the great craftsman Bezalel at the orders of Moses. And who gave Moses his orders? Well, that would be God himself. God said to Moses on Mount Sinai that he was to fashion a candlestick from a single piece of gold. The candlestick would have 6 branches, 3 on each side. The menorah was then placed in the tabernacle. For those who have heard the word but don't actually know what the tabernacle is, it was a portable temple. Well, more like a mobile yurt. The tabernacle was used by the Israelites as a makeshift piece of worship after their exodus of Egypt. It was their house of God, a shanty tent, up until they conquered Canaan. After all the conquering, the legendary menorah was transferred to Solomon's temple, but the temple was plundered and destroyed by the Babylonians. Bye-bye temple. Luckily though, the menorah survived. It was later placed in the Second Temple in Jerusalem, the new and improved, rebuilt and revised Solomon's temple. But then came the Romans in 70 AD and they destroyed the Second Temple. The Jews kept building temples and their enemies kept knocking them down. This time the menorah was stolen and taken back to Rome along with other treasures. What happened to the menorah after is a bit of a mystery. It turned out to be one of those slippery artifacts nobody could hang on to for very long. The Romans lost it when Rome was sacked in 455 AD. Rumor has it the Vandals took the menorah to the city of Carthage. But according to ancient historian Procopius, the Byzantines recovered it from Carthage and brought it to Constantinople in 533. Now, here's where the myth starts to get a little spooky. Emperor Justinian of the Byzantine Empire was a superstitious man. He knew the ancient history of the menorah, which was already an object of legend by the time of his rule. He didn't want it anywhere near him because he thought it was cursed. So Justinian allegedly sent it to Jerusalem, trying to return the menorah to the place where it belonged. Maybe it got there, or maybe it didn't. In the 7th century AD, Jerusalem fell to the Persians, and there's absolutely no trace of the menorah after that, but there are still rumors. One of those rumors is that the cursed menorah is stashed deep in the Vatican archives, locked up tighter than the deepest vault at Fort Knox. The Corrupted Testament. There is an item of incredible evil that's currently in the hands of the traveling museum of the world-famous paranormal and occult. When it comes to cursed objects, these guys have their work cut out for them. And while I could talk about dozens of objects in their collection, I want to focus on the Corrupted Testament. This old, worn, spooky copy of the New Testament comes from the year 1822. It was supposedly used for delivering Christians from the influence of Satan. A deliverance minister used the New Testament in countless exorcisms, more than feels possible. So many that there is a sweat stain on the leather binding from where the minister pressed the book against the heads of the possessed. Okay, then what's so evil about it? The story isn't finished yet. Some say the Corrupted Testament was used in too many exorcisms and has taken on an aspect of evil. Those who have interacted with the book claim that it stinks of sulfur, like the smell of hell itself. People who have had the book in their possession have suddenly been afflicted by insect infestations. And just getting near the book can make somebody sick, giving them an overwhelming sensation of dread. Some have even reported witnessing an apparition, like the ghost of a demon. According to the museum, it was the descendants of the minister who donated the book to them recently. No one is sure which demon might now possess it, but one thing's for certain, this book is too evil even for the Vatican's archives. The Blood of Christ. A Dutch art detective, yes, it's a real job, recently came into possession of one of the most sacred yet disturbing artifacts of the Catholic Church. The artifact was handed over to him in the dead of night by some thieves who feared they had been cursed. This is the most powerful of all the Christian artifacts, because what's more powerful than the blood of Christ? I'm not talking about the blood of Christ as in a sip of wine at church. This is the actual physical liquid blood of Jesus Christ. It's what the thieves stole from Figurine Abbey Church in June of 2022. They took an ornate golden shrine that allegedly contains twin vials of Jesus' blood. It's called the Precious Blood of Christ relic. 3 weeks after the theft in the black of night, the relic appeared on art detective Arthur Brand's doorstep. Apparently, the thieves had run into some trouble. Ever since they'd stolen Christ's blood, they had had nothing but rotten luck. Even for someone who isn't superstitious, stealing the blood of Christ feels like something that could give someone some seriously bad luck. It must be like breaking 10,000 mirrors and walking under 10,000 ladders at the same time. Arthur Brand is a renowned investigator who's been nicknamed the Dutch Indiana Jones by the press. He has an excellent record of recovering stolen art, and it was his reputation that drew the thieves to him. According to Arthur, the thieves didn't initially realize what they'd stolen. They knew it was an artifact, but figured they'd be able to sell it for some cash. They didn't realize they had pilfered vials of ancient blood. When they understood what they had done, they knew it was time to get rid of it. So they left it on Arthur's doorstep in a mangy cardboard box. How inappropriate is that? But just how legitimate is the relic? If the blood really is from Jesus Christ, it's rarer than liquid unicorn blood. Church records show that the box containing the blood has been kept in Figurine Abbey in northern France for the last 1,000 years. The blood supposedly dates back to just after Jesus was crucified, collected from the scene of the crime. But sadly, that's all anybody knows about it. Nobody knows how the blood found its way to the church or where it was for the first 1,000 years after the death and resurrection. Number 5. The Deadly Gospel of Satan. The book I'm about to show you has 3 names. It's been called the Red Dragon, the Grand Grimoire, and the Gospel of Satan, but I think the latter says everything you need to know about it. The medieval grimoire is said to possess unimaginable demonic power. It was written by a man who claimed to have Satan inside of him, in his very soul. And if the rumors are to be believed, the book is currently hiding in the secret archives underneath the Vatican. There isn't much that history can tell us about the book because its origins are vague at best. Some say it was written in 1520, and others claim there are passages that came straight from the biblical King Solomon. It was written in ancient Aramaic, and the unofficial author is Honorius of Thebes. There's even less I can tell you about Honorius than about his book. He was said to be a mystic in the Middle Ages who became possessed by the devil. Honorius used the knowledge imbued in him by the Prince of Darkness to write the thick tome of black magic. For the last 500 years or more, the occult manuscript has supposedly been passed from one pope to the next. It's said to be evidence that modern popes in the Vatican are all tools of Satan. It's a compelling story, but there's one thing you need to remember. Nobody has ever officially read this book. The only copy that survives is allegedly locked up in the Vatican, meaning only the holiest of the holy have access to this book of ultimate evil. Its pages could contain frightening spells, and if true, it's likely a good thing that the book is locked up tight. Rumor has it there are explicit instructions for summoning the devil in the book, though you do need special tools to summon Satan, like a blasting rod and a magic stone called Ematiel. Without the proper relics, you'll only end up being possessed by the devil instead of striking a bargain with him. One more thing about the Gospel of Satan. There are some altered copies currently in circulation. A version was produced in the 18th century in France, and another version was published in the 19th century and spread to French colonies. One of those versions can still be found in Caribbean countries, especially Haiti. They call it Le Véritable Dragon Rouge, but it isn't the original satanic gospel. Number 4. The Curse of Peter's Tomb. For the last 2,000 years, a curse has been hiding underneath the Vatican. It's no secret, but it is a little freaky. Buried beneath thick layers of dirt and crumbled stone is the curse of Saint Peter. According to tradition, Peter himself is buried underneath the Vatican. The Peter I'm talking about is the one from the Bible, the devout disciple of Jesus Christ, one of the Messiah's original 12 apostles. St. Peter's Basilica was built above the place where Peter was buried. In 1629, Pope Urban VIII launched a project to create a new St. Peter's Basilica. The original was old and crumbling. The Pope wanted a basilica for the ages, one that was modern and impressive. He also wanted it built above the true location of St. Peter's tomb. The architect in charge was Gian Lorenzo Bernini. He and his team started digging deep beneath the basilica as part of the construction project. They needed to make room for the huge bronze columns that would be built. But at roughly 70 feet deep, the workers stumbled upon an underground necropolis. You might think they were blown away by the bones and coffins, but they weren't. You can't dig anywhere in Rome without finding an ancient burial ground. The workers couldn't have cared less. After all, they had a schedule to meet. Architect Niccolò Alemani, the overseer of the excavation, opened some sarcophagi and looked at the bones inside. He determined that the bones belonged to nobody important. He gave the order to destroy the bones, get rid of the coffins, and keep digging. The next day, Niccolò became violently ill, and a few days later, he was dead. A terrible sickness started to spread, beginning with the people involved in the project. Father Francesco Sciarderio also became sick, and so did his scribe Bartolomeo. The scribe died, and one of Francesco's servants was found guilty of murder. Then the Pope himself got sick. People started talking about the Pope's construction project. They wished he would quit messing around with the bones beneath St. Peter's. It was believed that a curse had been unleashed, no doubt caused by the shameless destruction of the very place the first Christian pope's bones are at rest. But Pope Urban recovered from his sickness and construction continued. The architect, Gian Bernini, finished his masterpiece and everything was totally fine. Though to be fair, the Pope had to go down to the construction site himself, say prayers and oversee the proceedings. Perhaps without his protection, even more people would have died. In 1939, a new construction project was ordered by Pope Pius XII to lower the pavement of the Vatican grottos. And do you know what else happened in 1939? I'll give you a second to see if you can remember. In 1939, Hitler and Mussolini teamed up, signed a Pact of Steel, and pushed forward with World War II. Some think that as soon as the digging started at the Vatican, the curse of Peter plunged the world into chaos. Number 3. Secrets of alien life. A group of scientists is trying to get into the Vatican secret archives, known officially as the Vatican Apostolic Archives. The group of scientists are hoping to uncover information on aliens and paranormal activity. They believe that somewhere in the 50 miles of shelves beneath the Vatican is proof of alien life. There is some weird stuff going on right now, and it all started in 2023 with former US intelligence official David Grush. You might remember me talking about David last year. David gave a congressional testimony claiming that the Vatican is involved in an international cover-up. David said the Vatican and other world powers are hiding evidence of extraterrestrials from the general population. David also claimed that Pope Pius XII relayed information to the US about an alien ship recovered by former Italian dictator Benito Mussolini. In the months since David revealed all this information to the public, the Vatican has been under siege. Marco Greeley, secretary to the prefect of the archives, recently spoke with Catholic News Service about David's allegations. Marco said the archives have been receiving emails by people who want to know if David was telling the truth. People have requested to read personal letters written by people like the Virgin Mary and Pontius Pilate. But Marco has denied those requests, and the Vatican claims not to have any such letters. David hasn't been the only one to try and blow the lid off Vatican secrets. In 2019, Diana Walsh Pasulka, a professor at the University of North Carolina, published a book called American Cosmic. In her book, she alleged that the Vatican's archives are full of secret reports. Things like nuns witnessing magic orbs and other crazy aerial phenomena. Scientist Gary Nolan from Stanford University said the Vatican is likely the oldest library of paranormal knowledge still in existence. Gary is behind a scientific team trying to freely pursue the thousands of documents in the Vatican's vaults. He thinks that if there's any evidence of an advanced species appearing on the planet, the Vatican has it. According to the Vatican, there isn't one mention of an alien anywhere in their archives, but they do have accounts of miracles. For the Church, aliens are impossible and miracles happen through the will of God. These miraculous accounts are just what Gary and his team are interested in. Jeffrey Kripal from Rice University in Houston said stories of Catholic miracles are a big deal to UFO researchers. Catholic miracles are weirdly similar to close encounters of the third kind. Both involve telepathic communication, levitation, abduction, and other freak incidents that can't be explained through science. So, what do you think the Vatican has hiding in their archives? Maybe the Vatican is run by aliens, and that's why they won't admit what they know. Number 2. The mortified head of Saint Plunkett. If you've ever wanted to see a severed head, all you have to do is go to church in Ireland. The head of St. Oliver Plunkett is on display for the world to see at St. Peter's Church in Drogheda. It's not necessarily cursed, but you might feel cursed after looking into the rubbery eye sockets of a guy who's been dead since the 17th century. Oliver Plunkett was the leader of the Catholic Church in Ireland in the 1600s. During that century, Catholics faced persecution from rival religious groups. But hey, who am I kidding? It was the Protestants. The Catholics weren't even allowed to practice their religion in public. Plunkett worked to bridge the divide between Catholics and Protestants, but he was accused of treason, allegedly for conspiring to kill King Charles II. And for his alleged conspiracy and attempted assassination, he was hanged in 1681. Not just hanged. Plunkett was hanged, drawn, and quartered. You may have heard the term before, but do you know what drawing and quartering is? Or maybe I should say was, considering the barbaric practice has been out of style for a long time. To be hanged, drawn and quartered was to be fastened to a piece of wood and then dragged behind a horse to the gallows. Once at the gallows, the person was hanged, but they weren't killed. They were hanged until almost dead and then quartered. Think about that word for a second. They were quartered, as in ripped into fourths, torn limb from limb. It was considered such a heinous way to die that only men could be hanged, drawn and quartered. Women were given the much more humane execution of being burned alive at the stake. Either way, being convicted of treason sucked. With Plunkett dead, his head was taken by the Catholics back to Rome, and 40 years later, his head ended up being cared for by an order of nuns in Drogheda, Ireland. The nuns kept it preserved for 200 years, hidden from British authorities. They weren't free to put Plunkett's head on display until 1921, and it's still there now, sitting in a shrine at the church a century later. You can also see the heart of St. Lawrence O'Toole in Dublin, but that's a twisted tale for next time, so be sure to tune in again soon. Number 1. The Cursed Voodoo Figurine at the Louvre. There's a cursed object at the Louvre Museum in Paris that's so frightening the Vatican won't dare touch it. It's a voodoo figurine that's extremely disturbing. The figurine is of a small, naked female. Her hands are bound and so are her feet. They're bound together behind her in what looks like a really painful position, but that's not the worst part. The worst part is that she has 13 pins driven through her. She has one in each eye, one in each ear, and one through her mouth. There is a pin stabbed down into the top of her head, one straight through her sternum, and one through the bottom of each foot. According to the Louvre's official website, the creepy figurine was purchased in 1975 by someone named Matthias. The seller claimed that the object came from Egypt. But there's another piece to this story, and I don't mean that figuratively. There really is another piece. The figurine came complete with a curse tablet. The tablet tells us a lot more about what's going on here, and you're not going to believe it. The script on the tablet is estimated at around 1800 years old, give or take a few decades. It was written around the end of the 3rd century AD. The inscription on the tablet is a binding spell. Someone invoked the names of a whole heap of gods, enough gods to curse anyone. The inscription lists Pluto, Adonis, Barbaritha, Hermes, Thoth, Anubis, Persephone, and even Greek god of the underworld, Hades. It also called upon the power of divine demons and the spirits of prematurely dead men and women. The author of the cursed tablet wanted somebody destroyed with extreme prejudice. Can you guess who wrote the tablet and who they wanted destroyed? I'll give you one clue. Think about the figurine for a second. Mull over the meaning of the bound woman, and I think you'll hit the nail on the head. Here's a passage from the cursed tablet. I'm paraphrasing a little because the verbatim writing is not just messy, but full of expletives that I'm not about to say out loud. I entrust this binding spell to you gods, so that the daughter of Origine should not give any pleasure to another man except to me alone, and do not let her drink or eat or find sleep except with me. I conjure you, spirits of the dead, in the name of the terrible and the fearsome. That is a hardcore curse, and remember, I'm leaving out all the bad words and the truly disturbing parts. So, can you figure out who wrote the curse and who their intended victim was? It was almost definitely an angry ex-boyfriend trying to get his girlfriend back by cursing her with the power of Hades and a voodoo doll. This is one of the most frightening legitimate cursed objects anywhere in the world, but it gets even crazier. I can tell you the most probable place where the angry ex-boyfriend got his instructions for creating the tablet and the voodoo figurine. The instructions can be found in the Greek magical papyri, an ancient manuscript for spells and incantations. In the book, this particular curse is called a wondrous spell for binding a lover. It was written around 2100 years ago. The instructions say to take wax from a potter's wheel and make a voodoo figurine. Take 13 copper needles, then stick one in the brain, 2 in the ears, etc. This all matches perfectly with the figurine at the Louvre. Have you ever been dumped so hard you'd consider performing a magic ritual to get them back? Let me know in the comments, and thanks so much for watching. Remember to come back soon for more awesome stuff from the channel, and subscribe if you haven't already.